Alexa, play the Ubuntu podcast on TuneIn.
Getting the latest episode of Ubuntu podcast. Here it is from TuneIn.
Hello and welcome to Season 10, Episode 7 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Tuesday, the 18th of April, and we're going to spend some time discussing one rather important topic in the news and community. I'm Alan, and joining me this week is Emma. Welcome back.
Hi.
How are
Thanks for
you?
having me.
No worries. It's good to hear you. Mark.
Hello.
Hello. And Martin.
Hello.
Yay, we're all here. Super. It's lovely to have you back, Emma. What have you been up to recently?
Besides work, I finished a pretty major project at my house, bedazzling. I don't know if you guys know about my obsession with the color pink, but I added, I like pink sparkly to be precise.
Okay.
And so I bedazzle furniture and decorations. So I finished a whole wall of picture frames.
Wow. So this is what
Which took a very long
adding pink
time.
sparkly things to things and making them more pink and more sparkly.
Yes. You should see my kitchen table. It's amazing.
Well, you're going to have to send us photographs now.
Yes.
Okay, I'll tweet them. I'll tweet them later.
Yeah,
Oh my
please,
God.
please tweet them and tag Ubuntu Podcast so we can see those.
Okay.
So my daughter is similarly afflicted by this pink gene, and everything is pink everywhere. And I once went away to a work thing, and sometimes I bring clothes back for them, and I felt conflicted. Like, should I buy her pink stuff? You know, she's a girl and everything. She loves pink, and everything I bring back, it does. If I bring back something pink, she loves it, and I think actually I should just carry on buying pink stuff and just ignore everyone who tells me, no, you shouldn't buy her pink stuff. It's reinforcing stuff. So
I'm the easiest person to buy for because my birthday was in March and everybody just got me random pink stuff. It was amazing.
sweet. That's awesome. Mark, what have you been up to?
I have been completing a game called Sunless Sea.
What's that then?
It's a sort of ship trading roguelike story adventure kind of game.
You're selling it.
I've got a newbie question.
Go on.
I keep hearing it's either roguelike or roguelite. I'm not quite sure which I'm hearing.
So glad you're asking.
What
this
does that
question.
mean?
Right, so there was a game called Rogue, which is like a really old sort of text-based thing.
Before Mark was born.
Yeah, which is the kind of game that something like NetHack is based on, where you're like running around a dungeon and killing stuff and then dying and starting all over again.
Right.
So a roguelike is a game a bit like that. Usually you have sort of different classes of people and you go around collecting stuff and you die and you use what you learnt from that time to do a bit better next time.
You said it was boat-based. Are there boats in the caves or dungeons? Or
Well,
what?
you're in like an underground cavern with a massive ocean in it, and you go around in your ship visiting islands and unveiling stories and collecting stuff, and you can choose like one of 3 or 4 different sort of they're called ambitions. That's like your ultimate quest throughout the game, but it's a massive time sink and you can play it for hours and hours. And I completed one of the endings after playing it for a very long time.
I mean, an underground lake with islands, and
Yes.
you've got a boat down there. How did they get the wood down there? And how do the
There's
trees
a
grow?
whole story. It's this sort of weird Lovecraftian thing. Queen Victoria sold London to an underground tentacly monster thing, and and there's
That clears it up.
demons and talking dogs and monkeys and all sorts.
Still don't know how you photosynthesize, but all right, I'll let it slide.
Oh, mushrooms! You don't need photosynthesis.
You make boats out of mushrooms.
No, the boat's made out of wood, metal wood.
Oh,
What am I talking about?
all right, you got away with that one.
Yeah.
Should we get on with it?
Also, really big mushrooms go like woody as well.
Is this like a graphical adventure, text adventure type thing, or is this, pretty graphics, interactive?
It's a bit of both. Sort of when you're moving around, it's a very graphical game. But then when you're on one of the islands, it's more like a text adventure, choosing options and picking responses to questions and so on.
Okay.
So it's like half sort of, tactical chip trading kind of elite kind of thing, and half storytelling.
And at any point you get to race cars in this game?
Afraid not.
It's dead to me.
Well, on that bombshell, let's move on.
And now it's time for the news. And of course, there's only really one news story to discuss this week, and that's the announcement of a Snap general election. No, of course it's not. It's the announcement of Ubuntu's refocus from mobile and convergence to cloud and the Internet of Things. Now, as regular listeners to the podcast will probably know, Alan and Martin, my two glorious co-hosts, work for Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu. There's obviously implications for the future of people's jobs within the company as part of this story. So we feel it will probably be a bit insensitive and potentially career limiting for us to comment on the speculation and sort of internal company gossip within the show. So with that in mind, here's what we know so far. What's happened?
There was a blog post that was posted on the 5th of April. And it was titled Growing Ubuntu for Cloud and IoT Rather Than Phone and Convergence. I think this surprised a lot of people. It got shared around quite a lot, and I think it was a surprise to a lot of people who are competitors, users, and interested third parties. So there was a lot of resharing of that article, and then after that, obviously there's a lot of questions, and so there were lots of posts on, blogs and news articles on all the mainstream press. In fact, I was quite surprised to see there was a news article on the BBC about it, and
probably the most factually inaccurate coverage of the whole thing so far.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. That's what happened on the 5th of April.
Right. And so what exactly did we find out what's going to happen to Ubuntu heading towards the next LTS?
I think that's so. There was kind of like a couple of high level statements, but the detail is like some of it is yet to be worked out. But I think the general theme in the blog post was the goal for 1804 will be Unity 7 or 8 won't be the default desktop,
right?
But instead, Ubuntu will ship GNOME upstream rather than something that was developed internally, Unity.
Right. So a sort of a hark back to the pre-1204 days of shipping just a GNOME desktop, pretty much stock with an app selection.
Yeah, I don't think we ever shipped like stock upstream anything. Ever. There's always like, even if you go back to Warty Warthog, like the very first release of Ubuntu, it was customized a bit. There was a theme and a brown wallpaper. And
yes.
Yeah, it was customized a bit. And I realized, wallpaper is like the absolute minimum you can do to customize your distribution. There's like not a lot of stuff done there. But yeah, there was a fair amount of engineering work that went into making that an Ubuntu experience, as it were.
So this is a return to GNOME, though, and I suppose one thing I'd be interested is there are other desktop environments out there. Are there any others that you might have chosen ahead of GNOME?
It's trying to get a mention for Ubuntu Mate in there first.
Well, no, it's interesting because of course this is a return to GNOME, but it's not a return to the same GNOME that Ubuntu left.
No, it's not. No. Because the GNOME project moved on when we split off and started shipping Unity. GNOME went their way with GNOME Shell. There's some certain visual similarities between the two because the embryo of both projects started around about the same time with many of the same people from similar design documents. But they've gone their own ways and used different technology as well. Yeah. So the GNOME Shell is built on X and then ported so that it works on Wayland, and Unity 7 was built with Nux and Compiz, and then Unity 8 is now Qt and based on Mir. So they've diverged quite a lot. So this is quite a hard reset back to GNOME, that's for sure.
Yeah, But yeah, in answer to your question, Martin, I have been wondering, because before Unity, particularly before Unity got the HUD, which is its killer feature for me, that's where you can search and launch app menus from the keyboard. I was always using KDE. So I've thought of perhaps revisiting KDE. I know it's changed quite a lot since I last used it. So I'd certainly be up for exploring KDE again and seeing what it's got to offer now.
It's interesting. There's been a lot of, sorry, Martin, there's been a lot of discussion. I've seen like lots of people within a week or so of this post going out and the decision and the direction being set, a lot of people saying, right, that's it, wiped Unity off my machine, I've reinstalled, different distro or different desktop, or I've made nuke it from orbit and start all over again. A lot of people seem to have done that.
Yeah.
Although if you're running 1604, then, technically your Unity 7 installation doesn't explode tomorrow. It's not time bombed to blow up the second, the Canonical make the commitment to move to GNOME. But it kind of makes sense, I guess, for some people to switch over to some other desktop if they want, their future updates, I guess.
Yeah. So, Mark, has this made you rethink your, evaluating, Kubuntu, for example?
Possibly. I mean, yeah, I had no interest in really looking at another desktop other than Unity because it fits my workflow very well. But if Unity isn't going to have the sort of first line default status that it had before, then I definitely considered looking at something else and maybe trying Kubuntu again and trying KDE Neon and seeing what they're like.
So one thing that's interested me, Emma, is you get to talk to a lot of System 76 customers, and obviously the machines go out the door with Ubuntu on them with Unity, but do you ever get calls from people who are trying something different, who are they've wiped Ubuntu and they've installed something else, whether that's Arch or just a different desktop or whatever?
I would say at least half of the people I talk to ask if we can load a different desktop environment on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we wrote an article on our support page, just with a couple different options of just adding your desktop environment and leaving Ubuntu underneath, so you still have our drivers installed.
Yeah.
But it was that popular that we had to write something so we could have something easier to send to so many people.
And what desktops feature in that article, just out of interest?
There is Mint and GNOME, and I think Mate.
Martin will be happy about that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I had no idea that there would be a significant number of, we're somewhat a few steps away from end users a lot of the time, especially non-technical end users who buy computers from vendors such as System 76 and Dell and others. We generally don't get to interact with those people, and so we don't know if they've nuked it from orbit and installed Windows XP, or put Arch on it, or just changed the desktop, or carry on using Unity, because we don't tend to probe their machines, so we don't know what they're running.
Yeah. So
it's a pretty popular question every day.
Wow.
Yeah. So Emma, I guess from System 76's point of view, this is this announcement would have been quite significant for you, given that it's going to be like a change in sort of what you're going to have to support and what you're going to be testing on the machines that you're sending out. So what was the kind of reaction for you as sort of like a third party, but who's quite affected by this announcement?
Well, so I was really surprised. I think all of us didn't see it coming and weren't expecting it that day.
Yeah, you're telling me.
But it was really cool because Carl, our CEO, he noticed, everyone was really affected by the news and that we all had our different opinions about it. Yeah. Of course, there were the geek debates and speculations going on most of the day in different corners of the office. But we closed up early that day and had a round table where we could all just go around one by one and give our thoughts about it. So that helped with if everyone was scared or worried about our future, it kind of relieved everybody. And we're just really excited about it instead of worrying about the future. So I'm excited too, because that means we get to add a little bit more customization to the System 76 experience, since we'll be doing our own themes and adding extensions. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us.
So you see GNOME as, because it's a bit more open to customization, that gives you the chance to put your mark on it a bit more in what you ship.
Yeah, exactly. We've already started working on it. So
wow,
well,
cool.
We'll be interested to see what comes out of that. I think.
And if it's it's value add that you provide the other people. So typically if a company ships a machine, we reviewed a Dell last time, and one of the extra features they have, obviously they've got the hardware support stuff, the same as you do for your devices, but they only added a couple of extra applications to the desktop. There wasn't a lot that was changed. I guess this gives you the opportunity to tweak those things that, your users phone you and tell you, could you really change this? Could you make it bigger, smaller, move the thing to this side or that side, or up or down or whatever? And you could share that stuff. So people could, even if they didn't buy a System 76, obviously you would prefer they did. But if people didn't buy a System 76, if you open source those extensions, people could have the System 76 theme on, the machine that they built themselves or whatever. And
yeah, everything is going to be open source. I confirmed that already. So
sweet.
Cool. Well, the desktop was probably the biggest bit of news, but this wasn't just an announcement about the desktop. One of the interesting things for me was that although the shift is going away from the phone and there aren't going to be new phones and Ubuntu Touch isn't going to be maintained, snaps are still going to be taken forward as one of the core technologies of Ubuntu.
Right. So the phone was based on the Click technology, which is a precursor to Snaps. Yeah. And we learned a lot from Clicks and developed Snaps as kind of like Clicks on crack, or whatever you want to call it, or, Clicks version 2 is probably a safer thing to say. But I think it would have taken a significant amount of engineering effort to bring Snaps to the phone. And I guess, I don't know, I'm not speaking for my employer, but I guess that would have been, too much effort for too little return. I guess they've, some of this, as they've spoken about, Mark has spoken about, and others, some of this is financial and reorganization.
Yeah. And,
if you're doing something that isn't bringing in revenue, then don't carry on doing it. It doesn't make sense in any business. It doesn't make sense to carry on doing something that's hurting your bottom line, I guess.
Yeah, well, it does. Yeah, that's one of the things that struck me about it. Actually, previously, Mark has said, if Ubuntu just did the server stuff, then it could be profitable because that brings in money. It seems like this refocuses specifically around, the bits of the business which are actually, a commercial success. It means like some of it's a bit less sort of blue sky, like throw money at it and try it out and do something cool, but it's also stuff which is in the space it's in still quite cool and innovative.
I mean, those kind of like financial discussions are way above my pay grade, so I don't get into those. But yeah, it makes sense. Any business owner is going to focus on the things that make money, and and get rid of, jettison parts of the business. It's unfortunate, but the bits that don't.
And Snaps are part of the the future direction, along with cloud and server and IoT, and Snaps will continue to play a role on desktop Linux as well. And going along with that sort of Snaps are sort of solving problems in the IoT space at the moment. There's been a lot of reporting that, the feeling is that if we're going to GNOME 3 and using Wayland, then that's the end of Mia, which is the homegrown display server technology. But it's been made clear that there are IoT projects that are using Mia as the compositor, and that Mia will continue to, in Mark's words, receive investment to support those projects in the IoT space.
Is that because of the way that, as I understand it, Snaps have been part of their, confinement stuff is related to the way that Mia does confinement. So is that sort of a key thing from that point of view?
Well, there is the confinement angle, which is beneficial, but I think it's more about the fact that Wayland is a protocol. So if you want to use Wayland, you effectively have to write your own compositor, unless one of the reference compositors suits your use case. Whereas Mia, the server and the client are much more tightly coupled through APIs. So that requirement isn't there. So I think that's why it's been gaining traction in the IoT space.
Cool. Well, that was a bumper news segment. I guess we're going to be getting feedback on this for quite a while now, and we'll probably find more details on this emerge over the coming months, and especially in the run-up to the next few releases. So
it's actually, I guess Martin could talk about this briefly, but there was actually a planning meeting today as we record this.
There was.
Go on, give us the high level.
So there was an IRC meeting today on Hash Ubuntu Desktop on Freenode, and it was the first meeting between the Ubuntu GNOME team, the Ubuntu Desktop team, and other interested community members. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. There were lots of questions posed today, many of which have been deferred for future discussion because you simply can't try and discuss the whole thing up front. There's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done before some of the other decisions can be taken. But what was agreed today is there's been an agreement on how the Ubuntu GNOME team and the desktop team will collaborate in terms of removing the Unity patches from the GNOME stack that Ubuntu currently uses. So the idea is to remove some of the Unity specific patches there, and we're going to be using merge proposals and launchpad bugs, and then sort of more direct one-to-one communication in the Ubuntu development IRC channel, so that's going to be quite one-to-one and responsive. We're going to create a PPA. In fact, the PPA has already been created, where those new packages with the patches removed will be posted, new seeds for what the meta packages are derived from, and also for testing upgrades from your Ubuntu with Unity to your Ubuntu with GNOME. So that's going to be the testing platform. When all of that's working, then that will be switched into the archive, but it won't be moved to the archive until it's sort of known to be broadly working. There was then a discussion around what are called main inclusion requests. And for those
That's
of you...
not a confusing acronym.
No, yeah, the acronym is MEARS, which is... Yes, great. So a main inclusion request. So everything that's in the main repository in Ubuntu is security maintained. And for Ubuntu proper, only packages that are in main are on the image for Ubuntu. And those are the packages that get security reviewed and patched and what have you. So there's now some work going on to see what new packages need to move into the main repository in order to become security reviewed, and what packages that are in main need to be moved to Universe, which is where the flavors build. And then hopefully the plan is by 17.10 Alpha 2 will be the first milestone release with the GNOME session in place on Ubuntu, and there'll be a call for testing. And then stuff like choosing what the default applications are going to be, and whether we use LightDM or LightDM, or what extensions we're going to use, or what the default theme and icons is. That's all for later discussion and agreement, when the basics have been cleared away.
Cool. Well,
if you have any feedback, let us know where to send it.
Yes. Martin.
Oh, sorry. I was drifting. Drifting off there. Here comes a roundup of the community news and events. Mark, what's up first?
First of all, we have a couple of blog posts about making GNOME Shell feel like Unity. Very timely.
What could possibly have triggered this?
I know,
have
this
no
seems to be
idea.
blog du jour at the moment, doesn't it?
So, the first one was from friend of the show, Stuart Langridge, who started off with a blog post about some customizations you can make and some GNOME extensions you can install, which do things like put the panel on the left-hand side and put the button at the top to bring up the what's it called, activities something display, and put some more indicators in the top left with things like a better volume applet and various other bits and bobs, and basically trying to replicate the Unity experience we know and love on GNOME 3. And then some other guy did a blog post. What was that about then, Alan?
Yeah, much the same kind of thing. I wrote a little post just to list what I did, and I kind of also wanted to write a little bit about, why I really like Unity, because there's a bunch of features like we get.
Just before you get into that, I do want to hear what you like about Unity, but you're about to touch on something that I think has been something of a phenomenon of the comments in the various, blogs and articles about all of this, that all of those silent people that actually like Unity and like all of its features are now saying, but now all of this stuff that I like is going away and I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, I kind of wasn't going to touch on that, but yeah, okay.
Well, I think you're going to list off some of the features that you like about Unity, but what's happened is in this decision, we now are hearing from people that are perfectly happy with Unity and have been rattling off the things that they're really going to miss and they're struggling to find in other desktop environments.
Right, and nobody needs to change their desktop today. Unity's still there in the archive. It's still supported for a few years yet. So if you've got 1604, you can just carry on using Unity 7 if you really want to. It's not gonna, like I say, it's not gonna be taken out the back and shot in the head like tomorrow and then removed from the archive. It's still there and it will still work. So I just wanted to highlight some of the things that I liked about Unity that I will miss because, there are, having used it since pretty much day one of it being the desktop in Ubuntu, I got used to certain things, and I realized some of those things are muscle memory. Some of them are, you could just get used to something else. You get used to whatever is your default, and you work around the quibbles and, foibles. Sorry, and that's fine. But I kind of quite like things like the HUD. I quite like the dash when it works fast. When it doesn't work fast, I don't like it. But I like being able to press one button and type an application, and it just load And I like having all my indicators in the top right. I don't like having them spread around all over the place. I like having the launcher on the left-hand side. I like having pips next to actual applications to show, how many instances I've got open. There's a whole ton of stuff that Unity does. It's not perfect. It's got flaws, but I quite liked it. And so I wrote a blog post detailing how I turned my Unity 7 1604 desktop into Ubuntu GNOME.
No,
basically.
If I remember correctly, you were involved in the early days of Unity.
Not really.
No.
I did a bit of release management for it in the middle.
Right.
When it was like version 5, 6, that kind of area.
Okay.
But, and so I kind of got used to it and used to its foibles. I think no desktop is perfect. Everyone, when you start using a thing over and over again, all day, every day, you discover the weirdness and the oddities about those applications and the desktop and the quirks, and maybe you work around them. And now I've switched to something else, to try it out. I may find that I prefer this. I may find that I prefer GNOME. I may find that I actually start disabling some of the extensions and I prefer the default install. I don't know.
And
it's too early to say.
What have you discovered so far that you haven't been able to get GNOME to do that you missed most from Unity?
There was one thing that I do all the time, and it's a muscle memory thing that I've had since Windows something. When I want to maximize a window, I've always done this. I press Alt and Space, and it opens up the little menu in the top left of a window, and then I press X to maximize, because X is the shortcut key for maximize. So I just do Alt Space X, because all the keys are really close to each other, and it's really fast to maximize. I'm sure there's a better key combination. I'm sure there's some other function key, but that means moving my hand all the way up to the top of the keyboard, whereas I can do Alt Space X really fast.
Yeah.
And it seems like GNOME removed those accelerators. But the good thing is, one of the Ubuntu GNOME developers left a comment on the blog and said, hey, you should file a bug about that. It shouldn't be broken. So, if it is a bug, then we can get it fixed. So it was really nice. I got some feedback from people who use it. So
send that link to Laney, because he was discussing that very thing today and saying he wanted to fix it.
Oh, good. I will when I report the bug. So yes, that's my blog post. What's next, Emma?
Are we talking about the U App Explorer?
We are.
Yes.
Yes. Brian Douglas wrote about the future of U App Explorer and the separation of clicks and snaps and the possible inclusion of other package formats that run on Ubuntu.
For those who don't know, UApp Explorer was a web front end to the Click store that was used on the phone, because Canonical never actually got round to making a web front end to the store, but there was an API to query the store, and so Brian Douglas made a web front end to the store, so you could browse the apps, see what the ratings were, look at the screenshots and all that kind of good stuff, and depending upon where you ran it, you could actually install apps through UApp Explorer, and there was lots of extra features that he added over time. And he also added the ability to search for snaps when snaps became available in the store. And so he's written a nice blog post that details what he's going to do next with UApp Explorer.
Cool.
So that's worth a read, because a lot of people actually use it. It turns out people actually want a web front end to your store.
And he was also saying that it has its own API, which some apps depend upon.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't see that bit. Oh, interesting. Oh, so he's got his own launcher, hasn't he?
Right.
His own App Store app for the phone, which, it's rather cool.
Cool.
And finally, some guy called Ryan Sipes, who's he, has written a blog post called Return Home to GNOME, where he talks about Ubuntu switching back to Ubuntu GNOME and his past experience with GNOME and what the future may lie for Ubuntu, GNOME, and System 76. Worth a read as well.
Can I just say, Brian, how he's changed since that news came out?
He's what?
How he's changed.
Please do.
He's like a kid in the candy store. Like,
Really?
he just walks around. I feel like he's glowing. He's so excited. It's really adorable. He's going to hate me for saying that word.
So is this because there's something new and exciting on the horizon rather than, shipping the same desktop every 6 months?
I think he just loves GNOME, and he's really excited how we're going to put like our human spin on it. And he's just a huge fan of GNOME. So,
wow, that's cool. It's good to see that people get some happy news out of this. That's good to see.
That's the attitude of everybody at our office right now. But he's exceptionally glowing.
Awesome. I think that's the end of the community news. I don't think we've got any events today.
We don't.
That GUI love. If there's an app that you've been using that you just have to tell everyone about, email your GUI love to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
Well, that's it for episode 7. We'll be back next week when we'll be discussing more about what's going on at System 76 with Emma. And we'll bring you some virtual private love, whatever that means.
Yep. And we've all had our say this evening about what's going on with Ubuntu and the desktop, but we'd love to hear what you think about all of this as well.
Yeah, do let us know. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi.
And stop.